I'm sitting in my father's mahogany-paneled office, hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my breathing steady. Lawrence Whitmore stands behind his massive desk, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight I can see the muscle twitching. My older brother Vincent leans against the bookshelf, smirking like he's already won something. The air feels heavy, suffocating. "You're out, Arlene," my father says, his voice cold and flat. "I'm rewriting the will. Vincent gets everything. The estate, the business holdings, the investment portfolio. You get nothing." My stomach drops. 28 years of being the golden child, the one who actually understood finance, the daughter who built half his wealth through careful stock analysis. Gone. Just like that. Vincent's smirk widens. He's never worked a real day in his life, coasting on our family name while I pulled 16-hour days managing our assets. "Because of Dante," I say quietly, not a question. My father's face darkens. "Because you're associating with a criminal. A mafia boss. Arlene. Do you understand what that does to our family's reputation?" I meet his eyes, keeping my voice steady. "Dante Moretti runs legitimate businesses now. He's clean." "There's no such thing as a clean Moretti," Vincent mutters. I ignore him. But deep inside, something shifts. My father just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 months earlier, I met Dante at a charity auction. I wasn't looking for romance. I was there to network, to spot investment opportunities, to do what I always did. But when he approached me near the silent auction table, something sparked. He was tall, sharp-suited, with dark eyes that seemed to see straight through my carefully constructed walls. "You're Lawrence Whitmore's daughter," he said, not asking. I raised an eyebrow. "And you're Dante Moretti. Should I be nervous?" He smiled, genuine and warm. "Only if you're corrupt. I tend to make those people uncomfortable." We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his legitimate construction company, his real estate developments, his charity work with at-risk youth. I told him about my passion for finance, my frustration with my father's old-school methods, my dreams of running something that mattered. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. My father would hate it. Everyone knew the Moretti name, knew the family's dark history. But Dante wasn't his father or his uncles. He'd spent the last 5 years distancing himself from that world, building something clean. Our first date was coffee. Our second was dinner. By the third, I knew I was falling for someone my family would never accept. My father found out about Dante through Vincent, of course. My brother had been tracking my social media, feeding information back like the loyal lapdog he'd always been. When Lawrence confronted me at Sunday dinner, the entire family watched. My mother pale and silent, my younger sister Nina wide-eyed, Vincent grinning. "This ends now," my father commanded. "You will stop seeing him, or there will be consequences." I set down my fork carefully. "I'm 28 years old. You don't control my personal life." His face flushed red. "I control your future. Everything you have, your apartment, your car, your position in the company. It's all because of me. Don't forget that." But he was wrong. My apartment was paid for with money I'd earned through smart investments. My car was bought with bonuses from deals I'd personally closed. And my position in the company? I'd built that through sheer competence, not nepotism. I looked him in the eye. "Then take it all. I'll survive." The table went silent. My mother gasped. Vincent's grin faltered. My father's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment before he pointed toward the door. "Get out of my house." I stood, grabbed my purse, and walked out with my head high. Behind me I heard Nina whisper, "Dad, that's too far." But no one followed me. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing everything I knew about my family's wealth. Most people assumed Lawrence Whitmore was a self-made man, a brilliant investor who'd built an empire from scratch. That was partially true. But what nobody outside the family knew was that a significant portion of his success came from a shadow portfolio, one I'd been secretly managing for the past 3 years. It started when my father handed me a file marked Confidential Alpha Fund. Inside were details of offshore accounts, shell companies, and a sophisticated network of investments designed to stay invisible. Nothing illegal, but definitely private. He'd asked me to optimize it, to grow it quietly while he focused on the public-facing business. I'd done exactly that. I'd turned 12 million into 43 million through careful analysis, strategic positioning, and a knack for predicting market shifts. The Alpha Fund now generated consistent returns that propped up the entire Whitmore empire. Without it, my father's public companies would struggle to maintain their illusion of stability. And here was the beautiful part. The Alpha Fund was registered under a holding company I'd created. Technically, legally, I controlled it. My father trusted me so completely he'd never bothered to check the fine print. I pulled up the documentation, hands trembling slightly. Everything was there. My name, my signature, my authority. I called Dante that night, voice shaking despite my attempts at control. He answered on the second ring, concern immediate. Arlene, what's wrong? I told him everything. The confrontation, the disownment, the bitter words my father had thrown at me. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Dante said something that made my chest tighten. You know I'd never ask you to choose between your family and me. If walking away from this relationship saves what you've built with them, I'll understand. Tears burned my eyes. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? I looked at the Alpha Fund documents spread across my coffee table. I want them to see me. Really see me. Not as Lawrence Whitmore's daughter or Vincent's little sister. As Arlene. The person who actually built their fortune. Then show them, he said softly. We talked until 2 in the morning. Dante told me about his own family struggles, about breaking away from expectations, about building something new on his own terms. By the time we hung up, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I began the process of quietly asserting full legal control over the Alpha Fund. It would take time, paperwork, strategic moves. But I was patient. And I was very, very good at this. For 2 weeks, I worked in silence. I restructured the Alpha Fund's holdings, moving assets into new positions that were even more profitable. I consulted with 3 different attorneys to ensure every legal detail was ironclad. I documented everything, every transaction my father had authorized, every instruction he'd given me, every email proving I'd built this portfolio from the ground up. During this time, my father tried calling twice. I didn't answer. Vincent sent a gloating text. Enjoying poverty yet? I deleted it without responding. Only Nina reached out with genuine concern, asking if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just needed space. Meanwhile, I watched my family's public business from a distance. The quarterly earnings report was coming up, and I knew the numbers would look good, because the Alpha Fund's returns were still flowing into their accounts. My father had no idea he was living on borrowed time. Dante supported me through everything. He never pushed, never demanded updates. He just listened when I needed to talk and gave me space when I needed to think. One evening, he took me to a quiet rooftop restaurant and said, "Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." I believed him. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. It was my father's assistant, Patricia, her voice tight with stress. "Arlene, your father needs to speak with you immediately. It's urgent." I waited 3 hours before calling back. When Lawrence answered, his voice had lost its commanding edge. "Arlene, we need to talk about the Alpha Fund." "What about it?" I asked calmly. "The returns they've stopped flowing. There's some kind of hold on the accounts. Patricia says you might know something about it." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "The accounts aren't on hold, father. They've been transferred." Silence. Then, transferred where? "To my personal management company. The Alpha Fund is mine, remember? You signed over control 3 years ago when you asked me to manage it. I have all the documentation." I heard him breathing, rapid and harsh. This is absurd. That fund belongs to the family. No, I said softly. It belongs to me. I built it. Every successful trade, every strategic position, every dollar of growth, that was my work. And now I'm taking it with me. His voice rose to a shout. You can't do this. I'll sue you, You'll lose, I interrupted. I've already consulted with attorneys. Everything is legal. Everything is documented. The Alpha Fund is mine. He hung up. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding but mind clear. Within 24 hours, my father's lawyers contacted mine. They threatened legal action, demanded immediate return of stolen assets, threw around words like fiduciary duty and breach of trust. My attorney, a sharp woman named Claudia Reeves, dismantled every argument with cold precision. Ms. Whitmore has done nothing wrong, she wrote in response. The Alpha Fund was legally established under her management company 3 years ago with Mr. Whitmore's full knowledge and consent. All transactions have been properly documented and reported. If Mr. Whitmore wishes to pursue legal action, we welcome the opportunity to present our evidence in court. The threats stopped. Because they knew, just as I knew, that a court case would expose everything. The shadow portfolio my father had kept hidden from business partners. The offshore accounts he'd never mentioned to investors. The quiet wealth he'd preferred to keep private. Going public would destroy the Whitmore reputation far more than my relationship with Dante ever could. And my father, for all his bluster, wasn't stupid. He understood the bind he was in. But understanding didn't equal acceptance. I knew this was far from over. My mother called next, her voice trembling. Arlene, please. Your father is beside himself. The business is in trouble without those fund returns. Can't you just talk to him? Guilt twisted in my chest. I loved my mother, despite everything. Mom, he disowned me. He threw me out of the family because I fell in love with someone he disapproves of. He tried to control my entire life. He was just trying to protect you, she whispered. No, I said firmly. He was trying to control me. There's a difference. She was crying now. Please, Arlene. He's your father. I closed my eyes. I know, but that doesn't give him the right to treat me like property. Tell him if he wants to talk. He knows where to find me. But I'm not backing down. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life going. I'd always been the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who made my parents proud. Now I was the villain in their story, the ungrateful child who'd betrayed the family. But I wasn't the villain. I was just someone who'd finally decided to stop shrinking herself to fit their expectations. Nina showed up at my apartment unannounced on Saturday morning. She was 24, still living at home, still trying to navigate the minefield of our family dynamics. When I opened the door, she pulled me into a fierce hug. I'm on your side, she said. I don't care what Dad says. We made coffee and sat on my balcony. Nina told me how tense things had become at home, how Vincent was practically strutting around like he'd already inherited everything, how my father spent hours in his office making angry phone calls, how my mother cried at night when she thought no one could hear. Vincent told Dad you're trying to destroy the family, Nina said. He's convinced you're doing this out of spite. I shook my head. I'm doing this because I earned it. That portfolio exists because of my work. Not Dad's, not Vincent's. Mine. Nina studied me. Are you really in love with Dante Moretti? I met her eyes. Yes. Is he good to you? Better than anyone has ever been. She nodded slowly. Then I'm happy for you. And I think Dad's being ridiculous. Hearing her support made my throat tight. Thank you, Nina. That means everything. We spent the rest of the morning together, talking about life and dreams and futures. When she left, I felt a little less alone. The first crack in my father's armor came 2 weeks later. His company's quarterly report showed weaker than expected numbers. Financial analysts started asking questions. Where was the usual buffer? Why were profit margins tighter? Some began digging into the company's financial structure, though they hadn't found the alpha fund yet. My father's stress was visible even from a distance. I saw him at a charity event, one I attended with Dante, and he looked 10 years older. His face was drawn, his movements stiff. When our eyes met across the room, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Vincent noticed us and steered my father away quickly. But not before I caught the flash of panic in my brother's expression too. They were realizing the depth of their dependence on my work. Dante squeezed my hand. You okay? Yeah, I said. Just strange seeing them like this. Having regrets? I thought about it honestly. No. But it doesn't feel good either. He nodded, understanding without judgment. That was one of the things I loved about him. He never tried to tell me how to feel. He just stood beside me while I figured it out myself. Later that night, my father's lawyer sent another email. This time, the tone was different. Less threatening, more negotiating. They wanted to discuss terms. I smiled. The game was changing. The meeting was set for a neutral location, a private conference room in a downtown hotel. My father, Vincent, and their attorney arrived first. I came with Claudia and Dante. When my father saw Dante, his face darkened, but he said nothing. We sat across from each other like opposing armies. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Finally, my father spoke. What do you want, Arlene? I kept my voice steady. I want recognition. I want respect. And I want an apology. Vincent scoffed. This is blackmail. Claudia's voice was ice. No, Mr. Whitmore. This is business. Your sister built that portfolio from 12 million to 43 million. She has every legal right to manage it as she sees fit. She's being generous by even taking this meeting. My father's jaw clenched. I made you who you are. I gave you opportunities most people never get. You gave me access, I corrected. But I did the work. You know that's true. Silence stretched between us. Then my father said, Fine. You want recognition? What does that look like? I slid a document across the table. It outlined my terms, formal acknowledgement of my role in building the family's wealth, a public statement crediting my financial expertise, and most importantly, my father's acceptance of my relationship with Dante without interference or judgment. And if I refuse? My father asked. I met his eyes. Then the Alpha Fund remains under my sole control, and your company continues struggling without its safety net. Your choice. My father didn't answer immediately. He took the document, read it slowly, his face unreadable. Vincent whispered something in his ear, but Lawrence waved him off. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up. This is my fault, he said quietly. I underestimated you. The admission shocked me. Lawrence Whitmore didn't apologize, didn't admit mistakes. But here he was, his pride visibly crumbling. You're brilliant, Arlene. You always have been. I just couldn't accept that you'd built something I couldn't control. His voice cracked slightly. And then when you started seeing Moretti, I panicked. I thought I was losing you to someone dangerous. Dante spoke for the first time. Mr. Whitmore, I understand your concerns. My family's history is complicated, but I'm not my father or my uncles. I've spent years building legitimate businesses, distancing myself from that world. I care about your daughter deeply, and I'd never put her in danger. My father studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. I've had you investigated, Moretti. Everything checks out. You're clean. He turned back to me. I still don't like it. But I was wrong to make you choose. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you. Vincent looked furious, but he stayed silent. The meeting ended with my father signing an agreement. He would publicly acknowledge my contributions, accept my relationship, and respect my independence. In return, the Alpha Fund would continue supporting the family business, though under my management. The public statement went out the following week. It was brief but powerful. Lawrence Whitmore acknowledges the invaluable contributions of his daughter, Arlene Whitmore, whose financial expertise and strategic vision have been instrumental in the success of Whitmore Enterprises. We are proud of her accomplishments and grateful for her continued partnership. The business world took notice. Financial magazines requested interviews. Investment firms reached out with offers. Suddenly, I wasn't just Lawrence Whitmore's daughter. I was Arlene Whitmore, financial strategist. My father kept his word. He stopped interfering in my relationship with Dante. Family dinners were still awkward, but slowly, painfully, we began rebuilding. My mother hugged me tightly the first time I returned to their house. Nina was thrilled to have me back. Only Vincent remained hostile. He'd lost his guaranteed inheritance, his position as the golden child. But I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. He'd never earned what he thought he deserved. Dante and I grew closer through everything. He'd stood by me during the worst of it, never wavering. One night, sitting on his apartment balcony overlooking the city, he asked, "Do you regret how this all went down?" I thought about it. No. It needed to happen. I needed to stand up for myself. He smiled. "I'm proud of you." Those words meant more than he could know. 3 months after the agreement, I launched my own investment firm, Whitmore Capital Management. The Alpha Fund became its cornerstone, but I quickly attracted other high-net-worth clients who'd heard about my track record. Dante invested in the firm as a silent partner, providing capital and support without interfering in operations. My father's company stabilized now that the Alpha Fund returns were flowing again, though under a formal management contract with my firm. I charged fair rates, nothing predatory, but nothing charitable either. Business was business. Nina joined my firm as a junior analyst. She had a sharp mind and genuine passion for finance, something I'd never recognized while we were both trapped under our father's shadow. Training her felt like passing on something valuable, something that mattered. Vincent, meanwhile, struggled in his role at Whitmore Enterprises. Without me covering for his mistakes, his incompetence became obvious. My father had to bring in professional managers to compensate. I heard Vincent blamed me for his failures, but I'd stopped caring about his opinion. The real surprise came when my father asked to meet for coffee. Just the two of us. When I arrived at the small cafe he'd chosen, he looked nervous, an expression I'd never seen on him before. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began. "Really sorry. Not just for the inheritance threat, but for years of taking you for granted." We talked for 2 hours that day. My father told me about his own struggles with his father, about the pressure he'd felt to build something impressive, about the fear that had driven so many of his decisions. He admitted he'd projected his own insecurities onto me, trying to control my life because he couldn't control his own fears. "When you started dating Moretti, it triggered something," he said. "This fear that I was losing you, that you were making a mistake that would destroy everything. But the truth is, I was the one making the mistake." I listened, really listened. For the first time, I saw my father not as the imposing figure who dominated my childhood, but as a flawed human being carrying his own wounds. "I forgive you," I said finally. "But things can't go back to how they were." He nodded. "I know. And I don't want them to. You've proven you don't need me to succeed. Now I just want to be your father, not your boss or your controller." We left that cafe with a fragile but genuine understanding. Our relationship would never be simple, but it could be real. That was enough. Dante proposed on a quiet evening 6 months later. We were at his beach house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He didn't make a big production of it, just pulled out a ring and said, "I love you, Arlene. I love your strength and your brilliance and your stubborn refusal to back down. Will you marry me?" I said yes before he even finished the question. We kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace. No more battles to fight. No more proving myself necessary. Just happiness. When I told my family, the reactions were mixed but mostly positive. My mother cried happy tears. Nina squealed and immediately started planning bridal showers. My father shook Dante's hand and said, "Take care of her." Even that simple gesture felt like victory. Vincent sent a cold congratulations text. I didn't expect more. Some relationships were beyond repair, and I'd made peace with that. Planning the wedding was surprisingly fun. Dante's family embraced me warmly. His mother, Francesca, was a force of nature who insisted on teaching me family recipes and sharing embarrassing childhood stories about Dante. His younger sister, Isabella, became a fast friend. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be part of a family that celebrated you rather than controlled you. The wedding was beautiful, small and intimate, held in a garden overlooking the ocean. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Nina was my maid of honor. Even Vincent attended, though he stayed in the background. When Dante and I exchanged vows, I felt the weight of the past year lift away. We'd both fought hard to get here, fought against expectations, against fear, against people who thought they knew better. And we'd won. At the reception, my father gave a toast that surprised everyone. "I've learned something important this year," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Success isn't about control. It's about trust. My daughter taught me that. Arlene, you've built something remarkable, and you did it your way." I couldn't be prouder. The room erupted in applause. I looked at Dante, who squeezed my hand and smiled. This was everything I'd fought for: recognition, respect, love. Later, dancing with my new husband under strings of lights, I whispered, "We did it." He kissed my forehead. "You did it. I just got lucky enough to be here for the ride." Married life suited us. Dante and I moved into a beautiful home in the suburbs, close enough to the city for work but far enough for peace. Whitmore Capital Management continued growing. Within a year, we'd expanded to 15 clients and over 200 million in assets under management. My father and I developed a genuine friendship. He'd often call to ask my opinion on business matters, not as orders but as consultations. We'd meet for lunch monthly, talking about everything from market trends to family gossip. The power dynamic had finally equalized. Nina flourished at my firm. She had a natural talent for pattern recognition and risk assessment. I started grooming her for a partnership position, something that would have been impossible under our father's traditional structure. Vincent, on the other hand, left Whitmore Enterprises after a conflict with my father over strategy. He started his own consulting firm, which struggled but survived. We barely spoke, communicating only through terse emails when absolutely necessary. Some wounds ran too deep. Dante's construction company won a major municipal contract, expanding his business significantly. Watching him succeed in his own right made me proud. We were building something together, not codependent, but complementary. One evening, sitting on our porch watching fireflies, Dante said, "You know what I love most about us?" "What?" "We both had to fight to become ourselves. And now we get to just be." I smiled. Just be sounded perfect. A year into our marriage, I received an unexpected call from Vincent. His voice was tight, uncomfortable. "Arlene, I need advice." I almost dropped the phone. Vincent never asked for help, especially not from me. "What's wrong?" He explained that his consulting firm was bleeding money. He'd made some bad investments, taken on debt he couldn't service, and now faced potential bankruptcy. "I know I don't deserve your help," he said quietly, "but you're the smartest person I know when it comes to finance." I'm desperate. Part of me wanted to say no. He'd been cruel during my lowest moments, had gloated when I was disowned, had never apologized. But another part remembered that he was still my brother. Family was complicated. "Send me your financials," I said. "I'll take a look." Over the next week, I analyzed Vincent's situation. It was bad but not hopeless. He'd made rookie mistakes, over-leveraging, chasing high-risk deals, ignoring fundamentals. But the core business model was sound. I drafted a restructuring plan and sent it to him with a note. This will work, but only if you actually follow it. No shortcuts, no ego-driven decisions. He called back immediately. Thank you, Arlene. I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Helping Vincent taught me something important. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it did mean releasing the bitterness that had been weighing me down. I didn't suddenly trust him or forget how he'd treated me, but I stopped letting his past behavior consume my present emotions. His business slowly recovered following my restructuring plan. He called monthly with updates, asking questions, actually listening to my answers. Our relationship thawed from frozen hostility to cautious cordiality. It would never be warm, but it became functional. My father noticed the change. I'm proud of you for helping your brother, he said during one of our lunches. After how he treated you, it would have been easy to let him fail. I thought about it, I admitted. But spite isn't a good long-term strategy. He chuckled. You've become wiser than I ever was. That compliment, coming from him, meant the world. On our second anniversary, Dante surprised me with a gift. The deed to a small building downtown. For your firm, he explained. You've been renting space for too long. Time to have your own headquarters. I was speechless. The building was perfect. Historic brick exterior, modern interior, prime location. Dante, this is too much. He pulled me close. You're building an empire, Arlene. Empires need fortresses. We spent months renovating, creating a space that reflected my vision. Professional but warm, impressive but approachable. When Whitmore Capital Management officially moved in, we held an open house. My parents came, Nina brought champagne, clients sent congratulations. Even Vincent stopped by briefly. He looked around the sleek offices and said, "This is really impressive, Arlene. You've built something special." "Thanks," I replied, surprised by his sincerity. As I stood in my new corner office, looking out over the city, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the hard choices. All of it had been worth it to reach this moment. Standing in a space I'd created, surrounded by people who respected me, married to someone who loved me unconditionally. I'd fought for my independence and won. But more than that, I'd discovered who I really was beneath all the expectations and obligations. 3 years after my father's ultimatum, Whitmore Capital Management hit a major milestone. 500 million in assets under management. We celebrated with the entire team at an upscale restaurant. My father attended as a guest, no longer the patriarch demanding control but simply a proud parent. During dinner, he stood to make a toast. I've watched my daughter accomplish things I never could have imagined. She took what should have been a family crisis and turned it into an opportunity for growth. Not just financially, but personally. Arlene, you've taught this old man that sometimes the best thing a father can do is get out of his child's way. The room laughed and applauded. I felt tears threatening but blinked them back. This was the relationship I'd always wanted with him, built on mutual respect rather than control. Later, as Dante and I drove home, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed. 3 years ago, I'd been disowned, threatened, dismissed as ungrateful. Now I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your father had just accepted Dante from the beginning? Nina had asked me once. I'd thought about it carefully before answering. Honestly, I might never have found the courage to truly claim my independence. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the worst circumstances. Today, I'm sitting in my office, reviewing quarterly reports. Whitmore Capital Management continues exceeding projections. Nina just closed her first major deal independently. I couldn't be prouder. Dante's construction company is expanding into 3 new cities. Vincent's firm has stabilized, and though we're not close, We're no longer enemies. My father calls every Sunday now, just to chat. My mother and I have coffee together weekly. Family dinners happen monthly, and while they're not always smooth, they're genuine. The Alpha Fund, the portfolio that started everything, now represents just a fraction of my firm's total assets. But it remains special to me, a reminder of where I came from and what I fought to keep. People sometimes ask if I regret the confrontation with my father, if I wish things had happened differently. My answer is always the same. No. That crisis forced me to become the person I was meant to be. It gave me the courage to stand up for myself, to claim my worth, to refuse to shrink to fit someone else's expectations. Did it hurt? Absolutely. Was it worth it? Without question. Last week, my father and I met for lunch at the same cafe where he first apologized. We've made it a tradition, same table, same day each month. As we talked about market trends and family news, he suddenly grew serious. Arlene, I want you to know something, he said. The will has been rewritten. Everything is split evenly between you, Vincent, and Nina now. But more than that, I've put provisions in place ensuring nobody can ever threaten any of you with inheritance games again. What I did to you was unforgivable, and I won't let that pattern continue. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you, Dad. He smiled, and in that moment, I saw not the imposing businessman who dominated my childhood, but simply my father, flawed, learning, trying. That evening, I told Dante about the conversation. We were in our home office, him reviewing blueprints while I analyzed investment opportunities. He looked up and smiled. You did it, Arlene. You changed everything. I thought about his words. He was right. I'd taken a crisis, being disowned, dismissed, underestimated, and transformed it into an opportunity. I'd fought for my independence, claimed my worth, and built something remarkable. Looking back now, I realized that the inheritance I truly needed wasn't money or property. It was the strength to stand alone, the courage to love freely, and the wisdom to know my value regardless of anyone else's recognition. And that inheritance, that one I gave myself,